The September breeze carried the sweet scent of kettle corn and cotton candy across Millerstown Fall Festival, a cherished tradition in their small Indiana community. Silas Davenport's calloused hands gripped the wooden railing of his restoration booth, his knuckles white with tension. He hadn't planned on being here today, hadn't planned on facing the whispers and stares of townsfolk who still remembered him as the man who vanished 3 years ago. But Canton Creek restorations needed. The exposure and these century-old houses wouldn't save themselves. Besides, what were the chances of running into her? Millerstown might be small, but it was big enough for 2 people to avoid each other. At least that's what he'd been telling himself for the past 3 weeks since moving back. A child's laughter pierced through the festival's ambient noise, drawing his attention to a nearby cotton candy stand. His breath caught in his throat. Time seemed to slow, then stop entirely as he watched a little girl with bouncing light brown curls reach for the fluffy pink confection. Her small hand wrapped around the paper cone, and when she turned, Silas felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Those eyes, green hazel eyes that mirrored his own, set in a face that held echoes of the woman he'd loved, still loved if he was honest with himself. The little girl couldn't be more than 3 years old, her cheeks flushed with excitement, wearing a yellow sundress that twirled as she spun in circles. "Careful with that, sweetie," came a voice that sent tremors through his chest. "We don't want sticky fingers on your new dress." Marlo Reed stepped into view and Silas forgot how to breathe. She looked exactly the same and completely different all at once. Her black hair was shorter now, falling just past her shoulders, in loose waves, and she wore it down instead of in the intricate braids he remembered. She wore a simple floral dress, practical flats, and that quiet grace that had always made her seem like she knew secrets about the world that others could only guess it. The little girl, their daughter, his mind whispered with devastating clarity, tugged at Marlo's dress. "Mommy, can we go see the puppies? Please?" "In a minute, Ella. Let's finish your cotton candy first." Marlo's voice held that mixture of firmness and warmth that Silas remembered from their late-night conversations, when she'd talk about her dreams of becoming a teacher. Ella. Their daughter's name was Ella. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the railing, tighter, his workshop-roughened fingers finding purchase in the weathered wood. 1,000 memories crashed through him. The night Marlo told him she was pregnant, the terror that had gripped him as he remembered his father's raised fists, the way he'd packed his truck in the dead of night, convinced he was protecting them both from the monster he might become. He'd been wrong, so catastrophically wrong. Marlo must have felt his gaze because she looked up then, and their eyes met across the festival grounds. The cotton candy cone slipped from her fingers, landing in a pink heap on the grass. Ella noticed nothing, still happily eating her own treat, but Marlo's face went through a cascade of emotions that Silas felt like physical blows: shock, pain, anger, and something else he couldn't quite name. He watched as she gathered herself, squaring her shoulders in that way she had when facing something difficult. Her hand found Ella's shoulder, protective and steadying. "Ella, honey, we need to go. But the puppies, we'll see them another time, I promise." Marlo's voice was tight, controlled. She began steering Ella away, but not before casting one last look at Silas. It wasn't hatred in her eyes. He almost wished it was. Instead, it was disappointment, hurt, and a weariness that spoke of countless nights spent wondering why. Silas took an unconscious step forward, his boot scuffing against the wooden platform of his booth. He wanted to call out, to explain, to beg forgiveness, but what right did he have? 3 years of silence couldn't be erased with a simple "I'm sorry." He watched them disappear into the crowd, Ella's yellow dress like a sunbeam among the festival goers. His fingers found his beard, a nervous habit he'd developed over the years, running through the coarse hair as his mind raced. She was beautiful, their daughter. Perfect. And he'd missed everything. Her first words, her first steps, her first smile. The autumn wind picked up, scattering fallen leaves across his boots. Around him, the festival continued its cheerful rhythm, children laughing, carnival music playing, the smell of funnel cakes and grilled corn filling the air. But Silas stood frozen, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down on him like the heavy beams he often replaced in old houses. A young couple approached his booth, interested in his restoration services, but Silas could barely focus on their questions about hardwood floors and original fixtures. His responses were automatic, years of experience allowing him to discuss work while his mind replayed the moment of recognition over and over. Those eyes. Ella's eyes. His eyes. Later that evening, as the festival wound down and vendors began packing up their booths, Silas sat in his truck, staring at the steering wheel. The leather cover was worn smooth from years of gripping it too tight, especially on nights when memories threatened to overwhelm him. He pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and stared at Marlowe's number, unchanged after all these years, though he'd never had the courage to use it. His thumb hovered over the call button. What would he even say? "I'm sorry I ran away, because I was terrified of becoming my father. I've spent 3 years trying to become a better man. I've missed you every single day." Instead, he set the phone down and started the engine. The truck's headlights cut through the gathering dusk as he pulled away from the festival grounds. In his rearview mirror, the Ferris wheel's lights blinked like distant stars, reminding him of another night 3 years ago when he'd watched similar lights fade away as he drove out of town, convinced he was doing the right thing. He'd been wrong then. He wouldn't be wrong now. Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin the slow, careful work of restoration, not of old houses this time, but of trust, of relationships, of the family he'd abandoned. It would be the hardest restoration project of his life, with no guarantee of success. But as any good craftsman knows, the most valuable things are often the ones that take the most time and care to rebuild. Marlo Reed's hands trembled as she tucked Ella into bed that night, her daughter's cotton candy sticky fingers finally clean after their third washing. The yellow sundress hung neatly in the closet, and Ella's favorite stuffed elephant, dubbed Mr. Trunks, was secured firmly under her arm. Everything was normal routine, exactly as it should be, except nothing would ever be normal again. "Story time, Mommy?" Ella's eyes, those haunting, familiar eyes, blinked up at her sleepily. "Of course, sweet pea." Marlowe's voice remained steady, though her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. She reached for their current favorite, the little garden that could. But Ella shook her head. "Tell me about the brave princess again, the one who lived in the tower all by herself." Marlowe's throat tightened. She'd created that story during one of many sleepless nights when the weight of single motherhood had pressed down particularly hard. Once upon a time, she began, settling onto the edge of the small bed. There was a princess who lived in a tall tower. But unlike other princesses in towers, she wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue her. "Because she was brave," Ella whispered, snuggling deeper under her quilted blanket, the one Grandma Reed had made when she was born. "That's right. She was very brave. She grew her own garden, taught herself to fight dragons, and even learned how to fix the tower's roof all by herself." Marlo smoothed back Ella's curls, so like her father's in texture if not in color. "And do you know what made her the bravest? She wasn't scared to be alone," Ella recited, though her eyes were starting to drift closed. "That's right, baby. But she wasn't really alone because she had a beautiful little bird that sang to her every morning." Marlo leaned down to kiss her daughter's forehead. "Just like I have you." Within minutes, Ella's breathing had evened out into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. Marlo stayed perched on the bed's edge, watching the gentle rise and fall of her daughter's chest, fighting back the tears that had been threatening since the festival. Finally, she stood and made her way to the kitchen of their small rental, a house. Her hands moved automatically through the motions of making chamomile tea, her nightly ritual, one of many small ceremonies that had helped her maintain stability these past 3 years. The ceramic mug was warm against her palms as she sank into the worn armchair by the window, staring out at the moonlit yard where Ella's tricycle cast long shadows across the grass. Silas was back. The thought hit her again with the same force it had at the festival. Silas Davenport, with his gentle hands and tortured eyes, was back in Millerstown. He'd looked exactly the same and completely different. More beard, deeper, creases around his eyes, that same flannel and jeans combination he'd always favored. But there was something else, something in the way he'd looked at Ella. Her phone buzzed on the side table, making her jump. It was a text from her best friend, Regina Martinez. "Just heard Silas is back in town. You okay? Need me to come over?" Marlowe's fingers hovered over the keypad. Regina had been there through everything. The pregnancy test, the morning sickness, the nights of tears and rage when she'd realized Silas wasn't coming back. She'd been there, in the delivery room, holding Marlowe's hand and whispering encouragement when there was no one else to do it. "I'm fine," she typed back, then deleted it. Regina deserved better than platitudes. He was at the festival, saw Ella, not sure how to process this. The response came quickly. "Want me to key his truck? Because I will." Despite everything, Marlowe found herself smiling. No property damage necessary. Yet. She set the phone down and took another sip of tea, remembering the last time she'd seen Silas before today. It had been a Tuesday morning. Unremarkable except for the way his side of the bed had been cold, his drawers half empty, his truck gone from the driveway. No note. No explanation. Just absence where once there had been promise. The next few weeks had been a blur of nausea, morning sickness mixed with heartbreak, and decisions that had to be made quickly. Keep the baby? Move back in with her parents? Take the teaching job she'd been offered? Each choice had felt monumental, life-altering, but she'd made them all, one by one, building her new reality brick by careful brick. Now Silas threatened to shake that carefully constructed foundation. She'd seen the recognition in his eyes when he'd spotted Ella, watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. He knew. Of course he knew. Ella was his spitting image, in so many ways, from the curl of her hair to the way she scrunched her nose when concentrating. Marlowe's tea had gone cold. She stood, pouring the remainder down the sink, and began her nightly routine of checking locks and turning off lights. At the hall closet, she paused, then reached up to the highest shelf where a shoebox sat gathering dust. Inside were the few items she hadn't been able to throw away. A photo of her and Silas at the county fair, his arms around her as they both laughed at something now forgotten, a ticket stub from their first date at the old drive-in theater, the Aoi, small silver compass he'd given her for her birthday inscribed with, "Find your way back to me." The irony of that last item wasn't lost on her. Her fingers brushed against something else, a sealed envelope, the paper yellowed with age. The letter she'd written 6 months into her pregnancy, full of anger and hurt and things she'd needed to say but had no one to say them to. She'd never sent it, of course. She hadn't known where to send it. Now he was here, tangible, real, no longer just the ghost that haunted her quiet moments. He was in Millerstown, apparently running some kind of restoration business. The thought almost made her laugh. Silas, who'd broken the most important things in his life, now dedicated to fixing what others had left broken. A soft whimper from Ella's room sent her hurrying down the hall. Her daughter was still asleep, but her small face was scrunched in what might have been the beginning of a bad dream. Marlowe hummed softly, an old lullaby her own mother used to, sing, and watched as Ella's features relaxed back into peaceful slumber. "We're okay," she whispered, more to herself than to her sleeping child. "We've been okay for 3 years. Nothing has to change." But as she finally climbed into her own bed, Marlowe knew that wasn't true. Everything had already changed the moment Silas's eyes had met hers across the festival grounds. The careful walls she'd built, the routine she'd established, the story she'd crafted about their little family of 2. It was all shifting, realigning itself around the undeniable fact of his return. The question wasn't whether things would change, but how much control she'd have over that change. She'd learned to be strong, to be sufficient, to be both mother and father to Ella. She'd learned to live without Silas Davenport. The real question was, did she want to? Monday morning arrived with the crisp certainty of early autumn, and Millerstown Elementary buzzed with the controlled chaos of another school day beginning. Silas parked his truck across the street, his knuckles white against the steering wheel as he watched parents dropping off their children. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, gathering courage, when he spotted Marlo's blue Subaru pulling into the teacher's lot. She emerged wearing a forest green dress, her black hair pulled back in a neat bun, holding Ella's small backpack in one hand while their daughter skipped beside her. The sight made his chest ache. This simple morning routine he should have been part of for the past 3 years. Before he could second-guess himself, Silas grabbed the wooden box from his passenger seat and stepped out of the truck. The morning air was cool against his face as he crossed the street, his work boots heavy on the pavement. "Miss Reed!" A chorus of young voices greeted Marlo as she approached the kindergarten entrance. She smiled, warm and genuine, as several children rushed to hug her legs. Silas slowed his pace, struck by how natural she looked in this role, exactly what she'd always dreamed of becoming. Then Ella spotted him. Her eyes widened with recognition, and Silas realized she remembered him from the festival. "Mommy, look! It's the man with the pretty wood things!" Marlo's head snapped up, her smile freezing in place. "Ella, honey, go inside with Mrs. Rodriguez." She nodded to her teaching assistant, a woman in her 50s who'd been watching the interaction with obvious curiosity. "I'll be right there." "But, now please." Marlo's tone was gentle but firm. Ella pouted but complied, taking Mrs. Rodriguez's outstretched hand. Once Ella was inside, Marlo turned to face him fully. "What are you doing here, Silas?" He held up the wooden box, his latest project. "I made this. For Ella." The box was simple but elegant, crafted from reclaimed cherry wood with Ella's name carved into the lid in flowing script. "It's a treasure box, for keeping special things." Marlo's expression flickered between anger and something softer. "You can't just show up at her school." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from their shared past. "I know I have no right, but I wanted." He took a breath, steadying himself. "The festival wasn't how I wanted you to find out I was back." "And how exactly did you want me to find out?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Another note left in the middle of the night?" The accusation hit home. Several parents glanced their way as they passed, and Marlo took a step closer, lowering her voice. "This is my workplace, Silas. My safe space. You can't just appear here with handmade gifts and expect what? Everything to be okay." She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive posture he remembered from their worst arguments. "It's been 3 years." "I know." The words felt inadequate, but he pressed on. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist, I mean, for the past 2 years, working through everything. My father, my fears, what I did to you." This caught her off guard. The Silas she'd known would never have admitted to needing help, let alone seeking it out. Before she could respond, the first bell rang. "I have to go." She glanced at the box he still held. "I can't accept that." "Please." He held it out. "Not for me. For her. Every kid needs a place to keep their treasures." After a long moment, Marlo took the box. "This doesn't change anything." "I know." He stepped back, shoving his hands in his pockets. "But I'm here now, and I'd like to try to make things right, whatever that means, however long it takes." She studied him for a moment, then turned toward the school entrance. Pausing at the door, she looked back. "The diner. Tonight at 7. We need to talk, and it should be somewhere public." "I'll be there." He watched her disappear inside, then walked back to his truck, his heart pounding with equal parts hope and terror. The rest of his day passed in a blur of work, replacing rotted floorboards in the old Henderson house on Maple Street, a job that should have taken his full concentration, but instead left his mind free to wander. By late afternoon, sawdust coated his clothes and his thoughts were tangled as the exposed wiring he'd discovered behind the walls. Regina Martinez's hardware store was his last stop of the day. He needed supplies for tomorrow's job, though facing Marlo's best friend wasn't high on his list of desired activities. The bell above the door chimed as he entered Martinez Hardware, and Regina looked up from her inventory sheets, her dark eyes narrowing. Well, look what the cat dragged back to town. She set down her clipboard. You've got some nerve showing your face in here. I need wood filler and copper pipe fittings. He met her gaze steadily. That's all. There's a Home Depot in Riverside. She crossed her arms. 20 minutes away. Regina? Don't Regina me. She leaned across the counter. I held her hand while she gave birth to your daughter. Where were you? The question hit like a physical blow. Being a coward, he admitted quietly. Regina blinked, clearly not expecting this response. After a long moment, she turned and began gathering his supplies. Aisle 3 for the wood filler, get what you need. When he returned to the counter, she rang up his purchases in tense silence. As she handed him the receipt, she spoke again. If you hurt them again, either of them, they'll never find your body. I believe you. He paused at the door. Thank you, Regina, for being there when I wasn't. Her expression softened fractionally. Just don't make me regret not running you out of town right now. By 6:45, Silas sat in his truck outside Rosa's diner, watching the neon open sign flicker against the growing dusk. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same red vinyl. Booths. Same chrome trim. Same faded photos of local sports teams on the walls. He and Marlo had shared countless meals here, planning their future over burgers and chocolate shakes. Inside, he chose a booth near the back, ordered coffee, and waited. The dinner crowd was starting to thin out, but enough people remained to provide the buffer of background conversation. Old Mrs. Wilson at the counter kept shooting him suspicious looks over her meatloaf special. At exactly 7, the bell above. The door chimed. Marlo walked in, her hair now loose around her shoulders, still wearing the green dress from earlier. She slid into the booth across from him, declining the waitress's offer of coffee. Ella loved the box, she said without preamble. She's already filled it with rocks from the playground and 3 plastic dinosaurs. Something warm bloomed in his chest at this small detail about his daughter's life. I'm glad. We need to set some ground rules. Marlo's hands were folded on the table, her knuckles white. If you're going to be in town, if you're going to be in her life, I want to be, he interrupted. In both your lives, if you'll let me. You don't get to make that decision. Her voice was firm. You lost that right 3 years ago. Right? Now we're here to discuss Ella. Nothing else. The waitress returned and they fell silent as she refilled Silas's coffee. When she left, Marlo continued. I won't tell her you're her father. Not yet. She's too young to understand, and I won't risk her getting attached if you're just going to disappear again. I won't. You can't promise that. She held up a hand to stop his protest. Actions, Silas, not words. Show me you mean it. Show me you've changed. Then we'll talk about telling her the truth. He nodded slowly. What are your terms? You can see her at school events, public places, supervised, no surprise visits, no gifts without asking me first. She took a deep breath. And you need to tell me about the therapy. Everything you've learned, everything you're working on. I need to know you're really dealing with your issues, not just running from them in a different direction. Okay. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, drawing strength from its warmth. Can I start now? Marlo glanced at her watch, then nodded. You have 1 hour. And so, in a booth at Rosa's diner with the smell of coffee and pie in the air and the curious eyes of their small town watching, Silas Davenport began the long process of excavating his past, not to rebuild what was lost, but to lay a new foundation, brick by painful brick. The autumn wind rustled through Millerstown Community Park as Silas arrived early Saturday morning, tools in hand. He'd volunteered to help with the playground restoration project, a decision that had nothing to do with knowing Marlo brought Ella here every weekend. At least that's what he told himself as he unloaded his truck. You're actually going through with this? Regina's voice carried across the parking lot. She stood by her pickup, surrounded by lumber and hardware supplies she'd donated for the project. Someone needs to fix the swings, he replied, lifting out his toolbox. Might as well be me. Right. And the fact that Marlo and Ella come here every Saturday morning has nothing to do with it? Regina's tone was skeptical, but she helped him unload the remaining supplies. Just remember what I said about hiding your body. Hard to forget. He paused, setting down a box of bolts. How is she? Really? Regina studied him for a long moment. She's stronger than she should have to be. Works extra shifts at the libraries. Reading program to make ends meet. Never complains. Never asks for help. She pointed a finger at his chest. And if you breathe a word of that to her, I'll deny everything and then kill you. Other volunteers began arriving, members of the PTA, local business owners' parents who used the park regularly. Silas lost himself in the work, replacing worn boards and tightening loose bolts, grateful for the physical labor that kept his thoughts from spinning out of control. Around 10, he heard Ella's distinctive laugh carrying across the playground. Looking up from the swing set he was repairing, he saw Marlo helping their daughter out of her light jacket. Ella wore purple leggings and a unicorn sweater, her curls contained under a knitted beanie that matched her mother's. Mr. Davenport, Ella's face lit up with recognition. Are you fixing the swings? Silas's heart clenched at the formal address. Sure am, making them safe and strong. Can I watch? She bounced on her toes, looking between him and Marlo. Please, Mommy. Marlo hesitated, then nodded. Stay where I can see you. For the next hour, Silas worked under the watchful eyes of his daughter, explaining each step in terms a 3-year-old might understand. See this bolt here? It's like the playground's backbone. Gotta make sure it's nice and tight. Like Mr. Trunks, Ella declared, clutching her ever-present stuffed elephant. He has a loose leg, but Mommy fixed him with her sewing kit. Your Mommy's good at fixing things, isn't she? The words came out before he could stop them. He glanced at Marlo, who stood nearby pretending to read a book while obviously monitoring every interaction. Uh-huh, she fixes everything. Ella tilted her head, studying him with unsettling intensity. Do you fix other things too, besides swings? I fix old houses, he explained, tightening another bolt. Make them pretty and safe again. Like a doctor for houses, he chuckled. Something like that. Cool. Can you fix my dollhouse? The roof keeps falling off and it makes Barbie mad. The request hung in the air like frost. Silas looked to Marlo, who had gone very still. That's up to your mom, he said carefully. I only fix things when I'm invited. Marlo closed her book. Ella, honey, why don't you go show Regina your new shoes? I need to talk to Mr. Davenport for a minute. Once Ella was safely engaged with Regina, Marlo approached the swing set. You're good with her. She makes it easy. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Smart kid. She is. Marlo wrapped her arms around herself, that familiar self-protective gesture that made him ache. The dollhouse. I got it at a yard sale. It needs work, but I couldn't afford a new one. I could take a look, he offered cautiously. Professional courtesy. This isn't about the dollhouse. She met his eyes. You can't just fix everything with tools and good intentions. I know. He set down his wrench. But maybe fixing things is a start. Actions, not words. Isn't that what you said? Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the slide area. One of the older kids had gotten stuck at the top, and parents were rushing to help. Marlo instinctively moved toward the chaos, but Silas was already on his feet. I've got my ladder in the truck, he called, jogging to his vehicle. Within minutes, he had the situation handled, helping the scared child down while other parents watched with approval. When he returned to the swing set, Marlo's expression had shifted slightly. The library's hosting a DIY workshop next weekend, she said slowly. Teaching kids basic repair skills. We could use someone with actual experience. The invitation was tentative, loaded with unspoken conditions. What time? 2 o'clock. Ella will be there. She loves craft time. Marlo picked up her book. Just keep things simple. Professional. He nodded, understanding the multiple layers of her warning. Simple. Professional. I can do that. Throughout the rest of the morning, Silas felt Marlo's eyes on him as he completed the swing set repairs. He worked methodically, thoroughly, trying to show with every careful movement that he could be trusted with broken things. During lunch break, he sat alone at a picnic table, unwrapping the sandwich he'd packed. A small shadow fell across his lunch. Mr. Davenport. Ella stood there holding half a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Mommy always says sharing is caring. Want to trade? His throat tightened. That's very kind of you. Sure, we can trade. They exchanged sandwich halves solemnly, like diplomats negotiating a peace treaty. Your sandwich is good, she declared after a bite, but it needs more jelly. I'll remember that for next time. The words slipped out naturally and he froze, wondering if he'd overstepped. But Ella just nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable promise to make. Good. Because Mommy says too much peanut butter makes your mouth sticky. She finished her half of his turkey sandwich and stood up. Thanks for fixing the swings, Mr. Davenport. They don't look scary anymore. She skipped back to where Marlo waited by their picnic blanket, leaving Silas to stare at the half-eaten PB&J in his hand. Such a simple thing, sharing lunch with his daughter. Yet it felt monumental, like laying the first stone in a bridge across a vast canyon. Later, as he packed up his tools, Regina approached again. You know what you're doing? Not really, he admitted. But I'm trying to do it right this time. She handed him a business card. Local parenting support group. Meets Thursdays at the community center. Lot of single parents, some dealing with custody issues. At his surprised look, she shrugged. Don't make me regret this. The card felt heavy in his pocket as he drove home that evening. His apartment above Old Man Chen's pharmacy was small but clean, the walls lined with half-finished woodworking projects. He pinned the card to his bulletin board, next to his therapy appointments and AA meeting schedule. Another step on the long road to becoming someone worthy of the second chance he desperately wanted. In the kitchen, he found himself adding extra jelly to his evening sandwich, smiling at the memory of Ella's solemn culinary advice. The smile faded as he spotted his reflection in the window. He looked like his father in the dim light. But for the first time, that resemblance didn't feel like a curse. His father had never tried to fix what he'd broken, never sought help, never admitted he was wrong. Silas pulled out his phone and added another reminder to his calendar. Buy more grape jelly. The Millerstown Public Library stood as a testament to small-town persistence, its red brick walls weathered but proud. Marlo arrived early for her Saturday shift, using the quiet morning hours to prepare for the DIY workshop. She arranged chairs in a semicircle, set out craft supplies, and tried not to think about how Silas would soon occupy this space that had been her sanctuary. You're stress organizing again, commented Diana Chen, the head librarian, watching Marlo rearrange the supply table for the third time. The glue sticks were fine where they were. I just want everything perfect for the kids, Marlo replied, though they both knew that wasn't the whole truth. Diana's knowing look spoke volumes. As the wife of Old Man Chen, who owned the pharmacy where Silas now rented an apartment, she was privy to more town gossip than most. And this has nothing to do with your new volunteer instructor? Before Marlo could respond, Ella burst through the children's section entrance, followed by Regina, who'd offered to watch her during Marlo's morning shift. Mommy, I made this for Mr. Davenport. Ella waved a piece of paper with enthusiasm. It's a welcome card for the workshop. Marlo's heart clenched as she examined her daughter's artwork. The paper featured a crayon drawing of two figures, a tall one with a brown beard and a smaller one holding what appeared to be tools, standing beside what might have been a house, or possibly a giraffe. With Ella's art, it was sometimes hard to tell. That's very thoughtful, sweetie. She shot Regina a look, but her friend raised her hands in defense. Hey, don't blame me. She insisted on making it during craft time. At the diner. You know how she gets when she has an idea in her head. Yes, Marlowe did know. That particular trait came straight from her father. That same quiet determination that had always made Silas excellent at his work, if not at dealing with his emotions. The library began filling with families for the afternoon workshop. Marlowe kept busy at the circulation desk, purposely not watching the entrance, but she felt it the moment Silas walked in, carrying a worn leather tool bag and what looked like a dozen small wooden boxes. Mr. Davenport. Ella's voice carried through the library despite her attempt at a whisper. She rushed forward with her drawing, then stopped short, suddenly shy. Silas knelt down to her level, accepting the paper with careful hands. Is this for me? His voice was soft, reverent, as if he'd been handed a priceless artifact instead of a child's crayon drawing. Uh-huh. That's you fixing houses, and that's me helping. She pointed to the figures. Do you like it? I love it. He cleared his throat. Would it be okay if I put this up in my workshop? To remind me how houses should look? Ella beamed, and Marlowe had to turn away, busying herself with reshelving books. The interaction was too natural, too perfect, everything she'd imagined during those lonely nights of pregnancy, when she dreamed of how Silas would be with their child. The workshop began with Silas introducing basic tool safety to the gathered children and parents. He'd brought child-safe plastic tools for the younger kids and was teaching them how to identify different types of screwdrivers when Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with her grandson, Miguel. Sorry we're late, she called out. Someone couldn't find his favorite dinosaur shirt. Miguel, usually shy, lit up at the sight of Ella and hurried to sit beside her. Marlowe watched as Silas seamlessly incorporated the new arrivals into the lesson, noting how he gave extra attention to the quieter children while keeping the more energetic ones engaged. He's good at this, Diana murmured, appearing beside Marlowe at the desk. Natural teacher. He always was good with his hands, Marlowe replied, then flushed at Diana's raised eyebrow. I meant with building things. Of course you did. Diana patted her arm. You know, sometimes the things we try hardest to keep separate have a way of coming together on their own. The workshop progressed to actual projects, simple repairs on donated toys and books. Silas had prepared small wooden boxes similar to Ella's treasure box but unfinished, letting each child sand and decorate their own. He moved from table to table, offering quiet encouragement and gentle corrections. Look, Mommy. Ella held up, her box newly adorned with butterfly stickers and somewhat uneven purple paint. Mr. Davenport showed me how to make the corners smooth. That's wonderful, baby. Marlowe forced a smile, even as her heart ached at how naturally Ella had taken to Silas. She'd always worried about her daughter growing up without a father figure, but now she worried about something else entirely. What would happen if Silas disappeared again? During the cleanup, while the children enjoyed library-approved snacks, Silas approached the circulation desk. He looked nervous, running a hand through his hair in that familiar way that still made her stomach flutter traitorously. Thanks for letting me do this, he said quietly. It means a lot. The kids enjoyed it. She kept her voice professional, despite the memory of how those hands had once traced patterns on her skin. You did well with them. I've been thinking. He glanced at where Ella sat with Miguel, both children completely absorbed in their new boxes. The community center's starting a weekend workshop series, teaching kids basic carpentry, how to build birdhouses and such. I'm one of the instructors. Silas. It's completely supervised, he added quickly. Other parents, center staff. I thought, maybe Ella would like it. She seems to have a knack for building things. The unspoken words hung between them. She gets that from me. Before Marlowe could respond, Diana called out from the reference section. Marlowe, could you help me with something? Think about it, Silas said, stepping back. No pressure. Just think about it. Later that evening, after Ella had gone to bed, her new wooden box proudly displayed on her nightstand next to Mr. Trunk's, Marlowe sat at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and Silas's workshop flyer. The paper was crisp and professional, listing safety precautions and parental supervision requirements. Everything above board, everything proper. Her phone buzzed with a text from Regina. Miguel's mom says the carpentry workshop is legit, runs background checks on all instructors. Want me to sign up with Lucas so Ella has buddies there? Lucas was Regina's nephew, a quiet 4-year-old who'd recently come to live with her after his mother's deployment overseas. The idea of Ella having friends there, of it being a normal activity instead of a loaded family dynamic, was tempting. Another text came through, this one from Diana. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't keeping walls up, it's knowing when to build doors instead. Marlo set down her phone and walked to Ella's room, watching her daughter sleep. The moonlight caught the edge of Silas's drawing, now taped carefully above Ella's bed. In the dim light, the crayon figures seemed to smile at her, offering a glimpse of what could be. She returned to the kitchen and picked up her phone. "What time is the workshop?" she typed to Regina, then added, "And yes, please come with Lucas." The response was immediate. "Got your back always, but you know this changes things, right?" Marlo looked at the family photo on her fridge, just her and Ella at the beach last summer, both smiling into the camera. "I know," she replied. "But maybe some things need to change." She added the workshop to her calendar, then opened her journal, another habit from therapy, and wrote, "Today I built a door. I'm not sure yet if I'm ready to open it." The Millerstown Community Center buzzed with anticipation as parents and children gathered for the first weekend carpentry workshop. Silas arranged tools at each workstation, his hands steady despite his racing heart. He'd triple-checked everything: safety, goggles sized for small faces, pre-cut wood pieces with smooth edges, rubber mallets instead of metal hammers. "Someone's nervous," observed Phil Martinez, Regina's husband and the center's maintenance supervisor. "The tables are already perfect, man. Just want to get it right." Silas adjusted a pair of safety goggles for the 4th time. He'd been up since dawn, preparing for this moment, knowing that Marlo's trust hung by a thread as delicate as a spider's web. The door opened, letting in a burst of cool October air along with Regina, Lucas, and, his heart stopped, Marlo and Ella. His daughter wore overalls with unicorns embroidered on the pockets, her curls tucked under a bright yellow construction helmet that was slightly too big for her head. "Look, Mr. Davenport." She pointed to her helmet. "Now I'm ready to build stuff just like you." "Perfect safety gear," he managed, his voice thick. He glanced at Marlo, who gave him a small nod. She looked beautiful in a simple sweater and jeans, her black hair braided back practically. Ready for work, not putting up walls. It felt like progress. As other families arrived, Silas began the workshop with basic safety rules. He'd prepared carefully, making sure every instruction was child-friendly without being condescending. "Today we're building birdhouses," he announced, unveiling the prototype he'd made. "Every bird needs a safe place to call home." The symbolism wasn't lost on Marlo, who stood at the back of the room with Regina. He saw her hand tighten on her coffee cup but focused on helping the children don their safety gear. Ella ended up at a workstation between Lucas and Miguel, who'd arrived with his grandmother. Mrs. Rodriguez caught Silas's eye and smiled warmly. "My Carlos was good with his hands too," she said, referring to her late husband. "It's a gift, being able to build things." The morning progressed smoothly as little hands learned to sand wood and line up pieces. Silas moved from table to table, offering guidance and encouragement. He kept his interactions with Ella identical to those with the other children. Professional, warm, but not too personal. Still, he couldn't help noticing how she stuck her tongue out in concentration just like he did. How she checked her measurements twice before marking the wood. "You're doing great," he told her workstation group, watching as they carefully applied wood glue. "Remember, sometimes the strongest bonds need time to set." "Like friendship," Ella declared, grinning at Lucas, who shyly smiled back. "Mommy says the best friendships grow slowly, like her garden." "Your mommy's very wise," Silas replied, catching Marlo's eye across the room. She was watching them, her expression unreadable. During the snack break, while the first round of glue dried, Phil gathered the children for story time. Ella, however, lingered at her workstation, studying her birdhouse with serious intent. "Something on your mind, kiddo?" Silas asked, keeping his voice casual as he cleaned up nearby tools. "Do birds have daddies?" The question came out of nowhere, hitting him like a physical blow. "Yes," he managed, his throat tight. "They do." She traced the edge of her birdhouse. "Miguel has a daddy in heaven and Lucas's daddy is in the army, but I don't have one." She looked up at him with those haunting green hazel eyes. "Did he fly away like a bird?" Silas felt the room spin. Across the workshop, he saw Marlo freeze, obviously having overheard. She started moving toward them, but Regina intercepted her, whispering something urgent. "That's—" He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "That's a very big question. One that your mommy would be best to answer." "But you know about building homes," Ella persisted. "Could we build one big enough for a daddy bird to come back?" The innocence of her question, the hope in her voice, made his hands shake as he gathered scraps of wood. "Sometimes," he said softly. "The birds that fly away have their own reasons, but that doesn't mean—" He swallowed hard. "That doesn't mean they don't think about their nests every single day." "Ella!" Marlo's voice cut through the moment. She'd finally made it across the room. "Honey, let's go get some juice. Mr. Davenport needs to help the other children, too." Their daughter nodded, sliding off her chair. At the last moment, she turned back. "When my birdhouse is done, can I paint it green? Like your eyes?" "Of course," he whispered, but she was already skipping away toward the snack table. Marlo remained, her arms crossed. "We need to talk. After." He nodded, unable to trust his voice. For the rest of the workshop, he threw himself into helping other children, hyper-aware of Marlo's gaze following his every move. When the final birdhouses were drying and parents were gathering coats and bags, he stepped outside for air. The community center's back garden was peaceful in the late morning sun. Dead leaves skittered across the pavement, and the old oak tree was losing the last of its foliage. He heard the door open behind him. "She's asking questions," Marlo said without preamble. "Questions I don't know how to answer anymore. I'm sorry about earlier, I didn't mean to." "I know." She moved to stand beside him, both of them watching, the leaves dance in the wind. "But we can't keep doing this dance, Silas. She's too smart, too observant, and she's starting to notice things." "Like what?" "Like how your eyes crinkle the same way hers do when you smile. How you both tap your fingers when you're thinking." Marlo hugged herself against the chill. She drew another picture yesterday, a bird family this time, 3 birds. The implication hung heavy in the autumn air. "What do you want me to do?" "I don't know." Her honesty was brutal, beautiful. "I've been so focused on protecting her, on being enough by myself, that I never planned for this. For you coming back, for you being—" She gestured vaguely at the community center. "Good with her. Good for her." "I've been going to those parenting groups," he admitted. "The ones Regina told me about. Learning about child development, attachment theory, how to support kids through big changes." Marlo turned to look at him fully. "You're really serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." He met her gaze, steadily. "I know I can't erase the past 3 years, can't take back the pain I caused, but I want to be here now, for however long you'll let me, in whatever way you think is best for Ella." A crash from inside the community center interrupted them. They rushed back in to find Ella's birdhouse had fallen. One wall cracked from the impact. Their daughter stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Without thinking, Silas knelt beside her. "Hey, it's okay. Look." He picked up the pieces. "This is an easy fix. Want to learn how to make it even stronger than before?" Ella nodded, wiping her eyes. Together they gathered tools and wood glue, Silas explaining each step as they repaired the damage. When they finished, the birdhouse was whole again, with only a faint line showing where it had broken. "See?" he said softly. "Sometimes things that break can be fixed. They might have scars, might look a little different, but they can be stronger at the broken places." He felt Marlowe's presence behind them before she spoke. "Ella, sweetie, why don't you go show Lucas your repair job? I'm sure he'd love to. Learn that technique too." Once Ella was out of earshot, Marlowe touched his shoulder lightly. "Tomorrow, coffee at Rose's, 8 a.m. Her voice was quiet but firm. "We need to make a plan. For all of us." Silas watched Ella proudly showing her restored birdhouse to Lucas and Miguel, her earlier tears forgotten in the triumph of rebuilding something broken. "Tomorrow," he agreed, hope blooming cautiously in his chest. Like the birdhouse, some things needed to break completely before they could be rebuilt stronger than before. Rose's diner was quiet at 8 on Sunday morning, most of Millerstown still wrapped in post-church tranquility. Marlowe arrived first, sliding into their usual booth, their old booth, and ordered a full pot of coffee. She'd left Ella with Regina after a sleepless night of wrestling with decisions that felt impossible, no matter which way she turned them. The bell above the door chimed. Silas walked in, and for a moment, time slipped. He wore the same kind of flannel shirt he'd worn on their first date 6 years ago. His beard neatly trimmed, his hair still slightly damp from a morning shower. Some things hadn't changed. The way he nodded to old man Chen at the counter, how he slid into the booth with that careful grace that belied his size. "You came," she said, pouring him coffee from the pot before he could ask. "You still remember how I take it?" He watched her add 2 sugars, no cream. "After all this time, some things stick." She wrapped her hands around her own mug, drawing strength from its warmth. "Like how Ella has your exact mannerisms. Things I tried not to see for 3 years, but now they're all you can see." He took a sip of coffee, buying time. "She asked about her father. Not just yesterday, she's been asking more and more." Marlowe stared into her coffee, as if it might hold answers. At first it was little things. Why some kids had daddies, and she didn't. I could handle those questions, but now she's connecting dots we didn't mean for her to find. "Exactly." She looked up at him. "Do you know what she asked me last night? She wanted to know if her daddy had green eyes like Mr. Davenport, because hers are green too, and she learned about heredity in her science program at the library." Silas set down his cup carefully. "What did you tell her?" "That it was time for bed." Marlowe's laugh held no humor. "I'm running out of deflections, Silas, and I'm running out of reasons why they're necessary." The morning sun slanted through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across their table. Outside, Millerstown was waking up, church bells ringing, early joggers passing by, the Sunday paper delivery truck making its rounds. "I've been thinking," Silas began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "No, that's not right. I've been preparing. Those parenting groups, the therapy sessions, the workshops, they weren't just about being better. They were about being ready for this conversation, for whatever you decide." "What exactly are you proposing?" "The truth." He met her eyes steadily. "Not all at once, maybe, but starting somewhere, maybe with why I left, first with you, then with her when she's ready to understand. About my father, about the violence I grew up with, about my fears of continuing that cycle. You really have been working on this in therapy. Twice a week for 2 years. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos before sliding it across the table. "This is my therapy journal. Dr. Harrison, my therapist, suggested I document my progress. The hard days, the breakthroughs, the ways I'm learning to break the cycle." Marlowe looked through the photos, pages filled with honest, raw writing about generational trauma, about fear, about love and redemption, about Ella, even before he knew her, about hopes of being worthy of a second chance. "You never stopped thinking about us," she said softly. "Not for a single day." He took back the phone. "But thoughts aren't enough. I know that now. It's actions that matter. Like you said. Rosa herself approached their table, coffee pot in hand. She'd owned the diner for 30 years and had seen every drama in Millerstown play out over eggs and toast. Refill, dears? They nodded, waiting in comfortable silence as she topped off their cups. When she left, Marlowe spoke again. I have conditions. Name them. First, we do this with professional help. Family counseling, not just for you or me, but for all of us, including Ella. Agreed. Second, we move slowly. No sudden announcements, no dramatic revelations. We build up to it, prepare her, make sure she feels secure every step of the way, of course. Third, she took a deep breath. You sign legal papers, custody agreements, visitation schedules, support arrangements. Not because I don't trust your intentions, but because Ella deserves stability. Written, documented stability. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow. Fourth, and this is non-negotiable, you never ever leave again. No matter how hard it gets, no matter what demons surface. You stay and fight for her, for us, or this ends before it begins. I swear it. His voice was rough with emotion. I'll sign it in blood if you need me to. And finally, she reached into her bag, pulling out a small, worn envelope. You read this. The letter I wrote you 6 months into my pregnancy. The one I never sent because I had no idea where to send it. Silas took the envelope with trembling hands. Now. He opened it carefully, unfolding pages that had been read and refolded countless times. Marlowe watched his face as he read, seeing every emotion play across features she still knew better than her own. Dear Silas, he read aloud, voice shaking. Today our baby kicked for the first time. I was in the middle of teaching my kindergarten class about butterflies, about how they have to break out of their chrysalis to become strong enough to fly. The irony wasn't lost on me. His voice broke. He had to stop several times as he read, especially at the parts describing Marlowe's fear, her anger, her desperate wish that he would drive back into town and prove her wrong about men and promises and love. When he finished, the diner had filled with the after-church crowd, their quiet bubble of intensity surrounded by the normal Sunday bustle. Silas carefully refolded the letter, his hands still shaking. I keep thinking about butterflies now, Marlowe said quietly. About strength coming from breaking free. Maybe that's what these past 3 years were. Our chrysalis. Maybe we all needed to break a little to become strong enough for what comes next. And what comes next? Next, she reached across the table, taking his hand for the first time in 3 years. Next, we tell our daughter a story about a man who loved her mother, but was scared of becoming his father, about how he went away to learn how to be better, and how he came back when he was ready to be the daddy she deserves. When? Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. First, we need to prepare. I'll call Dr. Monroe. She's a family therapist Regina recommended. We'll set up appointments, make a plan. And in the meantime? In the meantime, Mr. Davenport can keep teaching woodworking, can keep showing up, being consistent, proving with actions what words can't say yet. Silas nodded, understanding the gift she was offering, the chance to build a foundation before adding the weight of truth to it. One more thing, Marlowe added, pulling out her wallet. Last night Ella drew this. She handed him a folded piece of paper. I think you should keep it. It was another crayon drawing. A green-eyed bird teaching a smaller green-eyed bird how to build a nest while a black-haired bird watched from nearby. She sees us, Marlowe said softly. Even if she doesn't understand yet, she sees us. Silas carefully tucked the drawing into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. Then we better make sure what she's seeing is something worth believing in. Doctor, Catherine Monroe's office felt more like a living room than a therapy space, with comfortable couches and warm lighting that softened the November rain beating against the windows. Marlowe sat on one end of the plush sectional, Silas on the other, with enough space between them to fit their unspoken fears. Before we begin discussing how to approach this with Ella, Dr. Monroe said, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, I'd like to understand where you both are emotionally. Marlo, you mentioned on the phone that there's been some progress? Marlo nodded, fidgeting with the charm bracelet her mother had given her years ago. The woodworking workshops have been good. Ella loves them. And Silas? She glanced his way. He's been consistent, professional, everything we agreed on. Too professional sometimes, Silas admitted quietly. Yesterday she skinned her knee at the workshop and my first instinct was to comfort her. But I held back, let Marlo handle it, kept my distance. It felt wrong, Marlo finished. It felt wrong to both of us. Dr. Monroe made a note on her pad. These moments of instinctive parental response, they're natural. Suppressing them can create its own kind of tension. Silas, how are you managing that emotional restraint? Honestly? He ran a hand through his hair. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than therapy, harder than facing my father's legacy. Every time she smiles or asks a question or needs help, I want to be her dad, not just Mr. Davenport, the guy who teaches her about wood glue and safety goggles. And how does that make you feel, Marlo? Scared. The admission came out barely above a whisper. Because I see how natural it is between them, how right it feels, and that terrifies me. Because what if... She stopped, swallowing hard. What if I leave again? Silas finished. That's the fear, isn't it? The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like nature's own therapy session. Dr. Monroe let the moment settle before speaking again. Let's talk about the incident at school yesterday. You mentioned it was significant? Marlo closed her eyes, remembering. It was during parent-teacher conferences. I was meeting with Mrs. Rodriguez about Ella's progress, and Silas was there fixing some cabinets in the classroom. The school hired his company for renovations. Ella was playing in the reading corner, Silas continued, his voice tight. She found this book about family trees and she just looked up at us, both of us, and asked why her tree only had one side. How did you handle that moment? I didn't, Marlo admitted. I froze. Mrs. Rodriguez tried to redirect her attention. But Ella's too smart for that now, Silas finished. She keeps finding these moments, these perfect moments to ask questions we're not ready to answer. Dr. Monroe leaned forward slightly. Are you not ready? Or are you afraid of being ready? The question hung in the air like static before a storm. Finally, Marlo spoke. Last night I found her looking at old photos. She pulled out one from high school. Silas and I at homecoming. It had fallen behind my dresser years ago. I thought I'd packed all of them away. She pointed at teenage Silas and said, he has eyes like Mr. Davenport. What did you tell her? Nothing. I put the photo away and suggested we make hot chocolate. Marlo's laugh was hollow. I'm running out of distractions. Perhaps, Dr. Monroe suggested gently. It's time to stop distracting and start preparing. Not for an immediate revelation, but for creating an environment where truth can safely emerge. She pulled out a folder, spreading several papers on the coffee table between them. I'd like to propose a structured approach. First, individual sessions with each of you to address your specific fears and triggers. Then, carefully supervised interactions where you can begin relaxing some of the artificial boundaries. Always with clear parameters and professional support. What kind of interactions? Silas asked, leaning forward. Small steps. Instead of strictly professional settings like the workshops, maybe a group activity at the community center. Something that allows for more natural family-like dynamics while maintaining the safety of a public space. The Christmas festival, Marlo said suddenly. The community center's hosting it next weekend, games, crafts, holiday activities. That could be perfect, Dr. Monroe nodded. A casual environment where interactions can feel more organic. Silas, how do you feel about that? Terrified, he admitted, but in a good way. Like when you're about to sand down a valuable antique. Scared of ruining it, but knowing it needs to be done to make it beautiful again. Dr. Monroe smiled. That's a lovely metaphor. Marlo, I She took a deep breath. There's something I haven't told either of you. Yesterday, after the family tree incident, I asked Ella what she thought about Mr. Davenport, just casually, while we were making dinner. What did she say? Silas's voice was barely audible. She said, Marlowe's voice caught. She said, she wishes all daddies were like Mr. Davenport, because he knows how to fix broken things and never gets mad when kids make mistakes. The rain seemed to pause as if nature itself was holding its breath. Silas pressed his fist to his mouth, trying to contain his emotion. That's actually very promising, Dr. Monroe said softly. She's already formed a positive association, one based on real interactions and observations. It gives us a strong foundation to build upon. But what if we break that? Marlowe's voice shook. What if the truth ruins this beautiful thing she's created in her mind? That's why we go slowly, Dr. Monroe assured her. We create a bridge between Mr. Davenport who fixes things and Daddy who came back to fix what was broken. It's a journey, not a destination. She pulled out another set of papers. I'd like to give you both some exercises, ways to process your emotions between sessions to prepare for the gradual transitions ahead. And I want to schedule individual sessions, twice weekly for now. As they worked out the logistics, the rain began to ease, patches of late afternoon sun breaking through the clouds. When they stood to leave, Marlowe noticed Silas looking at something on his phone. What is it? He turned the screen toward It was a text from Regina with a photo attached. Ella at the hardware store, proudly showing Lucas the proper way to hold a rubber mallet. The caption read, like father, like daughter. Don't mess this up. We won't, Marlowe said, surprising herself with her certainty. This time we're doing it right. They walked out into the freshly washed evening, the air clean and full of possibility. At the parking lot, Silas paused. The Christmas festival, he said. What if I built something, a special project with all the kids, but designed with her in mind, Marlowe finished. What are you thinking? A dollhouse, not to replace the broken one, but to build alongside it. Something we create together, all of us, piece by piece. Like we're doing now. Marlowe looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man who'd left, but the father who'd come back determined to rebuild. Okay, she said softly. But we follow Dr. Monroe's lead. No rushing, no matter how right it feels. No rushing, he agreed. We've got time. And for the first time since he'd returned, Marlowe believed it might be true. The Millerstown Community Center sparkled with Christmas lights, every window frosted with artificial snow, and the scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air. Silas stood in the workshop area he'd set up, surrounded by pieces of what would become the community dollhouse, his most ambitious project yet. Are you sure about this? Regina asked, helping him arrange the tiny furniture he'd spent weeks carving. It's a big statement, even without words. Dr. Monroe approved it, he replied, adjusting a miniature rocking chair that matched the one in Marlowe's living room perfectly. Said sometimes children need physical representations of emotional truths. And this is supposed to represent a home. He touched the carefully crafted front door with its working brass knob no bigger than his thumbnail. One built by many hands, but with love at its foundation. The festival was in full swing, children running between activity stations while parents sipped hot chocolate and volunteers handed out candy canes. Marlowe arrived with Ella, who wore a red dress with white stockings and carried Mr. Trunks, wearing a tiny Santa hat. Mr. Davenport! Ella rushed over, her eyes wide at the high dollhouse display. Did you make all this? I started it, he said, kneeling to her level. But I need help finishing it. Want to learn how? She nodded enthusiastically, then turned to her mother. Can I, Mommy? Please? Marlowe approached, taking in the detailed craftsmanship, the bay windows that matched her childhood home, the wraparound porch like the one where Silas had first kissed her, the tiny swing set visible in the backyard. Of course, sweet pea, Her voice was steady, but Silas saw her hands tremble slightly. "I'll help too." They worked together, Silas guiding Ella's small hands as she placed tiny shingles on the roof. Other children joined in, decorating miniature Christmas trees for each room while their parents helped paint and arrange furniture. But at the center of it all was Ella, her face scrunched in concentration as she carefully glued each piece. "Look," she exclaimed, pointing to the little family room. "It has a fireplace like in my bedtime stories. Every home needs a warm heart," Silas said softly, showing her how to place the tiny stockings he'd cut from felt. The afternoon progressed, and the dollhouse took shape, not just physically, but emotionally. Each room held echoes of shared memories. The kitchen with its breakfast nook where Marlo always had her morning tea, the study with miniature books lining the walls, the child's bedroom with a tiny stuffed elephant on the bed. "It's missing something," Ella declared suddenly, stepping back to survey their work. "What do you think it needs?" Marlo asked, her hand resting lightly on their daughter's shoulder. "People." Ella ran to her backpack and pulled out her art supplies. "Can I draw them?" "Of course." Silas provided her with small wooden figures he'd prepared, simple shapes ready to be transformed by a child's imagination. They watched as Ella drew, her tongue poking out in concentration. First came a figure with black hair and a flowery dress, unmistakably Marlo. Then a smaller figure with curly hair and green eyes, holding what was clearly Mr. Trunks. Finally, she picked up the last wooden piece and looked directly at Silas. "Can I draw you too, Mr. Davenport, since you helped build it?" The room seemed to still. Marlo's breath caught audibly. Silas forced his voice to remain steady. "If you'd like." With careful strokes, Ella drew his beard, his flannel shirt, even the tool belt he wore during workshops. When she finished, she held up all three figures. "Now it's a real home." "Ella," Marlo said softly, following Dr. Monroe's carefully prepared script, "why did you want to put Mr. Davenport in the dollhouse?" "Because—" Ella arranged the figures in the tiny living room, placing them all on the couch she'd helped upholster with scraps of real fabric. "Because he fixes things, and he tells good stories, and he has eyes like mine, and—" She hesitated, looking between them with a child's piercing wisdom. "And because he looks at you the way Miguel's daddy looks at his mommy in the pictures on their wall." Silas felt his heart stop. Marlo stepped closer, her hand finding his arm for support. "You're very observant," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "And—" Ella touched the figures gently. "Sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I pretend he's my daddy. Is that okay?" The question hung in the air like snowflakes, delicate and transformative. Silas looked at Marlo, saw the tears she was fighting to hold back, the slight nod she gave him. "Ella," he said, kneeling beside the dollhouse, "what would you think if that wasn't just pretend?" She stared at him, her green hazel eyes. His eyes wide with understanding that went beyond her years. "Are you my real daddy?" "I am." His voice cracked. "I've been away, learning how to be a good daddy. But I came back. For you. For Mommy. If that's okay." Ella looked at Marlo. "Mommy? Is it true?" Marlo knelt beside them, completing their circle around the dollhouse that had become so much more than a Christmas project. "Yes, baby. It's true. Mr. Davenport, Daddy, he's been trying to show us how much he wants to be part of our family. Like with the workshops and the treasure box and now this beautiful dollhouse. Is that why I have his eyes?" "Yes, sweet pea." Marlo brushed a curl from Ella's face. "That's exactly why." Ella studied the wooden figures in the dollhouse, then looked up at Silas. Can I call you Daddy now, instead of Mr. Davenport?" "I would love that more than anything in the world." She threw her arms around his neck and Silas felt his world shift on its axis. He held her carefully, this precious gift he'd almost lost, and felt Marlo's hand join his on their daughter's back. Around them, the festival continued. Children, laughing, carols playing, the scent of hot chocolate and pine needles in the air. But in their corner around their dollhouse, a family was being rebuilt, piece by careful piece. "Look," Ella said finally, pulling back to point at the dollhouse's front porch. "The light is on, like it was waiting for us." "It was," Silas whispered, holding his daughter with one arm while his other hand found Marlowe's. "It was always waiting for us to come home." Christmas morning dawned clear and cold in Millerstown, frost painting delicate patterns on windows and turning the world into a crystal wonderland. Marlowe stood in her kitchen, warming her hands around her morning tea, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of promise. The past 2 weeks since the festival had been a whirlwind of adjustment, therapy sessions, and moments that took her breath away. Like Ella's first hesitant "daddy" when Silas came to read her bedtime story, or finding them both asleep on the couch. Ella curled against his chest while How the Grinch Stole Christmas played softly on TV. The sound of small feet padding down the hallway broke her reverie. "Mommy, is it time yet?" Marlowe smiled as Ella appeared, still in her Christmas pajamas, Mr. Trunks clutched firmly under one arm. "Almost, sweet pea. Remember what we agreed? Wait for Daddy before opening presents." Ella climbed onto a kitchen stool, acceptance mixing with anticipation on her face. "He promised he'd be here early." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Ella jumped down and ran to open it, Marlowe following close behind. Silas stood on the porch, snowflakes dusting his shoulders, holding what looked like a large wrapped present. But it was his expression that caught Marlowe's attention, a mix of joy, nervousness, and something deeper she was learning to trust again. "Daddy." Ella launched herself into his arms, and he caught her expertly, present and all. "You came." "Of course I did, sunshine." He kissed the top of her head. "I promised, didn't I?" The moment was so natural, so right, that Marlowe felt tears prick her eyes. Dr. Monroe had warned them about these moments, when the healing felt almost painful in its perfection. They moved to the living room, where the Christmas tree twinkled, with lights and memories. New ornaments hung alongside old ones. The paper crane Ella had made at school, the tiny wooden snowflakes Silas had carved for her, and in a place of honor, the 3 wooden figures from the community dollhouse. "Can we open presents now?" Ella bounced on her toes, eyeing the pile under the tree. "One special one first," Silas said, setting down the large package he'd brought. "This is from both of us." Marlowe raised an eyebrow. They hadn't discussed a joint gift. But as Ella tore into the wrapping paper, she understood. It was a photo album, handcrafted in wood and leather, with "Our Family Story" carved into the cover in Silas's distinctive style. "Look inside," he encouraged softly. Together, they opened the album. The first page held the photo Ella had found behind the dresser, teenage Silas and Marlowe at homecoming. But now it had a caption. "Where our story began." "That's you and Mommy," Ella exclaimed. "You looked so young." "We were," Marlowe said, touching the photo gently. "Just kids, really." The next pages told their story in pictures and words simple enough for a 3-year-old to understand. Photos of their early days, their love story, and then, carefully, honestly, the hard parts. "Sometimes people we love need to go away to learn how to be better," Silas read from one page, which showed a road stretching into the distance. "But that doesn't mean they stop loving us." Ella traced the words with her finger. "Like when you went to become a better daddy?" "Exactly like that." His voice was rough with emotion. The album continued, showing parallel timelines. Marlowe and Ella's life in Millerstown alongside Silas's journey through therapy, work, and growth. It culminated in recent photos, the workshop, the festival, their first family dinner at Rosa's Diner. The last page was different. Instead of photos, it held a key, a real one hanging from a red ribbon. "What's this for?" Ella asked, touching the key carefully. Silas looked at Marlowe, who nodded slightly. "Well, sunshine, that's another surprise. Remember the house on Cedar Street? The big Victorian with the wraparound porch? The pretty one you've been fixing?" "That's right. The owners asked me to restore it." Make it beautiful again. He took a deep breath. And when I finished, I bought it. For us. If you and Mommy would like to live there. Ella's eyes went wide. Really? All of us together? Only if you want. 2, Marlowe added quickly. We don't have to decide right away. But Ella was already jumping up and down. Can we go see it? Please. It's just like the dollhouse. And it was. Marlowe realized. The dollhouse hadn't just been a project. It had been a preview, a promise, a prayer. After presents, she said firmly, but smiled. And breakfast. They spent the morning in a blur of wrapping paper and joy, Ella delighting in her new books. And toys, Silas and Marlowe exchanging small, meaningful gifts that spoke of remembrance and hope. Around noon, Regina and Phil arrived with Lucas for Christmas dinner, bringing warmth and the comfortable chaos of chosen family. Later, as the winter sun began to set, they drove to Cedar Street. The Victorian stood proud against the darkening sky, its restored gingerbread trim and fresh paint glowing in the Christmas lights Silas had strung along the porch. Inside he'd prepared one room, the family room. A Christmas tree stood in the corner and the fireplace held stockings for each of them. The furniture was minimal, just the basics they'd need to start. But it was enough. Look. Ella ran to the window seat. It's just like in my drawings. I had a good inspiration, Silas said, watching their daughter arrange Mr. Trunks in his new spot. Marlowe stood in the center of the room, taking it all in. The house smelled of pine and possibility, of fresh paint and new beginnings. Through the windows she could see their neighbors' Christmas lights twinkling like earthbound stars. We don't have to move in right away, Silas said quietly, coming to stand beside her. We can take it slow like everything else. No. She surprised herself with her certainty. No more waiting. We've done enough of that. You're sure? In answer, she took his hand, leading him to where Ella sat in the window seat. Their daughter looked up at them, their eyes, bright with joy. Tell me the story again, Ella requested, making room for them to sit beside her. About how Daddy came home. Well, Marlowe began, feeling Silas's arm slip around her shoulders. It started at a fall festival when I saw him again. Outside, snow began to fall softly, each flake a tiny promise of renewal. Inside, in a room warmed by love and possibility, a family continued their story, not ending it, but beginning again, stronger at the broken places, ready for whatever chapters came next. And in Ella's new room upstairs, waiting to be discovered, stood the community dollhouse, its front porch light still glowing, welcoming them all home at last. 1 year later, the October sun painted Millerstown in shades of amber and gold as families gathered for the annual fall festival. The same event that had started it all, now transformed by the passage of time and the healing it had brought. Silas stood behind his booth, not just showcasing restorations now, but teaching. His junior craftsman program had become a staple of the community center, with a waiting list that made Regina tease him about franchising. But his favorite student was still the one who mattered most. Daddy, look. Ella, now 4.5, held up her latest creation, a small wooden jewelry box she'd helped sand and stain. Can we give it to Mommy now? Sure can, Sunshine. He watched as she carefully opened the box, revealing the ultrasound photo they'd tucked inside earlier that morning. They'd been keeping Marlowe's pregnancy secret for 12 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to share their joy. Marlowe approached their booth, her teaching bag slung over one shoulder. The early autumn breeze played with her hair, now streaked with subtle honey highlights that caught the sunlight. She'd started letting it grow again, a small change that spoke of deeper transformations. What's this? She asked as Ella thrust the box into her hands. Open it, open it. Their daughter bounced on her toes, a habit she'd never outgrown. Marlowe's eyes filled with tears as she lifted out the photo. On the back, in Ella's careful handwriting, coached by Silas, were the words, "Big sister in training." Really? She looked between them, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. Really, Silas confirmed, moving around the booth, to pull them both close. Though honestly, she's been practicing for months. Show mommy, sunshine. Ella pulled Mr. Trunks from her backpack, the faithful elephant now sporting a smaller companion. See, baby Trunks needs lots of love and teaching, just like my little brother or sister will. Or siblings, Silas murmured in Marlowe's ear. The doctor said the ultrasound showed 2 heartbeats. Marlowe's laugh was watery but joyful. Twins? We're having twins? A matched set, he confirmed, like the rocking chairs in our bedroom. The past year had been one of growth and careful rebuilding. They'd moved into the Victorian house gradually, making it their own room by room. The dollhouse from the Christmas festival held pride of place in the family room, regularly updated by Ella to reflect their evolving story, new furniture arrangements, seasonal decorations, and most recently, a mysterious new room she'd insisted on adding but wouldn't explain. Now I know why, Marlowe said, watching their daughter demonstrate proper baby elephant care to passers-by. She's been preparing for this. We all have, Silas replied softly. It hadn't always been easy. There had been hard conversations, moments of doubt, nights when old fears crept in like shadows. But they'd face them together, keeping their weekly appointments with Dr. Monroe, now moved to monthly check-ins like maintenance for the heart. The festival buzzed around them, familiar faces stopping to chat. Old Man Chen proudly showing off photos of his new granddaughter, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Miguel bringing them homemade empanadas. Regina and Phil with Lucas, who'd become Ella's best friend and constant partner in creative mischief. Remember last year? Marlowe asked, leaning into Silas's side. How scared we were. Terrified, he agreed. But look at us now. As if to illustrate his point, Ella returned to their embrace, squeezing between them with the natural confidence of a child who knew she was loved. Can we tell everyone now? About the babies? Why don't you help me make the announcement? Marlowe suggested. At the story circle? Ella's eyes lit up. Reading circle at the festival had become her special thing with Mommy, a tradition born from those early days of princess stories and brave birds. Later, as the sun began to set, families gathered on blankets and chairs near the festival's heart. Marlowe sat in her usual spot, Ella beside her with Mr. Trunks and Baby Trunks arranged carefully in her lap. Silas watched from nearby, his heart full. Today, Marlowe began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd, we're going to tell a new story. It's about a family that learned how to fix broken things, how to build new dreams, and how love can grow in unexpected ways. Like babies, Ella burst out, unable to contain her excitement any longer. We're getting 2 new babies. The announcement was met with cheers and congratulations, the tight-knit community celebrating as only small towns can. But Silas hardly noticed. He was watching his daughter's face, alight with joy and possibility, and his wife's gentle hands cradling their future. Later that night, after Ella was asleep in her room surrounded by the toys and tools that marked her unique path between 2 worlds, Silas and Marlowe stood on their wraparound porch. The festival lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of where their second chance had begun. I've been thinking about names, Marlowe said, her head resting against his shoulder. For the twins. Yeah? Maybe hope for a girl? Because that's what brought you back to us. Silas kissed her temple. And for a boy? Mason. She smiled up at him. Because some things are built to last. Above them, stars pierced the autumn sky like tiny promise keepers. Below, their porch light glowed warm and steady, a beacon calling their hearts home. And between these lights, a family stood complete. Not perfect, but perfectly themselves, ready for whatever stories waited to be told. Mr. Trunks watched from Ella's window, his small companion beside him, as the first leaves of another fall danced past on the evening breeze. In the restored Victorian that had become their home, love had done what love does best. It had built something new from something broken, stronger at every mended place. We all carry fears inherited from our family history, just as Silas had the courage to face his traumas in order not to repeat his father's mistakes. What was the moment in your life when you decided to break a negative cycle and write a new story? How did this decision change your life and the lives of the people you love? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.